What's going on, guys? DarkDeath5000 here with another War Thunder video. Today we're going to be looking at how to improve your aim in planes using the controller on PlayStation 4 and Xbox. So before we get into the settings and all that good stuff, one really simple change you can make that's going to improve your aim substantially is to get yourself a pair of these control freaks. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about these by now, but just for those that might not, what these basically do is they click on top of your existing joysticks and they raise the height of the sticks. So you gain a substantial amount of range with these, depending which ones you get, which control freaks you buy. It can give you roughly an extra 50% sensitivity, which when it comes to aiming in War Thunder, that's a pretty big deal. So these are going to improve your aim substantially. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend looking into getting some of these control freaks. As far as aiming is concerned, I find a lot of the time it's actually less about aiming, but more about getting them to fly into your guns. So another more subconscious change you can actually make to improve your aim is try to become more aware of why you're actually aiming, where you are aiming. So try and think ahead, plan where your target's going to go next. Like I said, if you can get them to fly into your guns, so fly into your cursor, you're going to have a much easier time aiming at them than you would be trying to outright follow them. But yeah, just try and plan ahead, guys. Subconsciously always think why you're aiming, where you're aiming. Try and put yourselves in their shoes. So this is probably going to be more user preference, but for me personally, I've always found the default colours a little too bright for my preference. Don't get me wrong, they look great, but for optimal aiming performance I prefer something that's a little easier on the eyes, a little less vibrant. So I've got into the habit of turning the colours down. So if you go into the options, you'll notice at the bottom left hand corner there, it says Post FX. So if you bring that up, you can actually set your colour correction, and I like to use the desaturated option here, which as you can see, it washes out your colours a little bit more, so it's going to look just a little bit more less vibrant and more towards being realistic. And the other thing I like to do is set the rain hard here, so that just brightens it up a little bit, adds some white to the colour. So again, that's going to help with your aiming. So another colour related option that you can make that's going to make a big deal to your aiming is the cursor colour. So generally you want something that's going to stand out against the background so you can see where you're aiming. Personally, I would recommend either red or yellow here, since they're going to stand out more against all the backgrounds. But again, this is more user preference, so just play around with them and find out what you like best. I use red mostly, but like I said, red or yellow should work. You probably want to avoid white and green because it's going to blend in with the sky and the ground. But yeah, just experiment with them. As with everything in War Thunder on console, a big part of the aiming comes down to having the right settings. So the first sensitivity related setting is going to be your X and Y axis for the aiming. You'll find it all the way at the bottom in your controls under mouse aim. So it's called Control X axis and Control Y axis. So these relate to your left stick, which in most circumstances, unless you've changed it, it's going to control the in-game aim cursor. So for most players I recommend you open these up and just turn the non-linearity down to 1. So by default this will be at 2, so I recommend you come in here and just turn it down to 1 for both axes. So that's X and the Y axis, but both those need to set to 1 on the non-linearity. So while non-linearity makes sense in full real simulator controls, in mouse aim it doesn't really make sense. It's going to hinder your performance really. You've got to remember a linear form of aiming is going to match the level of input on your joystick exactly on screen, whereas a non-linear form of aiming is only going to, it's going to alter the joystick curve, um, changing the level of input on screen, so you're not going to see what you're pressing on the joystick is not going to match on screen, so it's going to hinder your aiming a little bit. So I recommend you just turn it down. For following a cursor in mouse aim, it naturally makes sense for most players to have a linear form of aiming. So yeah, definitely try turning that down, guys, and just decide for yourselves what you think. So next up we have the acceleration. So gamepad aim acceleration. So most of you are probably familiar with mouse acceleration on a PC. If you have ever used Windows in particular, you've probably come across this before. It's a means of increasing the sensitivity and the rate of movement the more a mouse is moved. So in relation to a controller joystick, it's very much the same. We are technically moving a cursor around on screen, much like a mouse. So with our joysticks, we're moving the cursor. So for most users, it's going to help if this is enabled. So if you have acceleration, it's going to help you out. Personally, I run at 45% acceleration. I found anything between 20 to 50% should be fine. Again, it's more user preference, so everybody is going to have different preferences here. Just play around with it and find out what works best for you. The next one is acceleration delay, and this is what gives you what I like to call the kickback. It's going to control the amount of delay before the acceleration above kicks in. So personally, I've found a bit of delay here to be helpful, since it's going to help you get your low sensitivities in before the sensitivity gets kicked up. So you don't want to go too high or too low on this one. It's mainly for when you're on somebody's 6 o'clock, so you want to get the fine-tuned aim in. Or when you're using the max input values, you want the really fast input so you can get those snapshots in. Personally, I run at 45%, but again, anywhere within 40 to 60% should be optimal here. So the final sensitivity option is your gamepad camera control sensitivity. What this one does is it controls the overall sensitivity of your cursor in game. So this is the one that controls the rate at which that cursor moves around. Now I recommend you keep this on the high side, so I've got mine at 75% currently. Can run anywhere between 40 and up to 80%, but you don't want to go too low or too high with this one because it controls the camera as well. So bear in mind, if you go too low, the camera is going to be too slow to be useful. So you're not going to be able to pan around quick enough to look around. And again, if you go too high, the camera is going to be too sensitive, so if you try and look behind you, you might be looking on your right instead. So those are just some things to bear in mind. For new players, you're probably better off starting on the low side, so 45% should be fine. And as you get used to it, slowly start to increase it. Other than that, just play around with it, find out what works best for you. Again, these are all user preference settings. Everybody's going to be different. Everybody is different in how they aim. Some people can deal with higher sensitivities, whereas some people can't. So yeah, just use what works best for you. You don't have to use the identical settings to what I'm using here. So just play around with it, guys, and use what you prefer. Okay, so I realize this one isn't going to be for everybody. Particularly if you've been playing for a while, you're probably already set in your ways. But for those of you that might just be starting out with planes, I recommend you go into your settings and get rid of the default L2 trigger aim, where it zooms and tracks the target for you. So I find there are several flaws with this default method of aiming. Firstly, it's aiming at a very weird angle, so you can't always judge distances and you can't judge where to lead. So it's already making things difficult, and then when you counter in this crazy amount of zoom as well. So when I'm focused on a target like this, all I can now see is my nose, which means I can easily become target fixated. I can miss what's going on around me. And worse still, if you're near the sea level or you're near trees, houses, things like that, you could easily miss them, and you can actually wind up crashing. So yeah, it's not ideal. Not only that, but you're often shooting off the screen, so you can't actually see where you're firing. So I find that difficult. Yeah, what I recommend you do is you go into your settings, disable the default tracking and aiming axis. You'll find it roughly at the bottom. Here it is, tracking/aiming axis. So open that up, remove the axis. So effectively you're disabling that by removing the axis, and then back out of that. Remove the tracking camera, and then you're going to want to go to your zoom axis. Set that to L2, so your left trigger. Enable it with L2 as well. And then what I like to do is I like to give it some negative correction to reduce the zoom level. So if we say 10%, minus 10%, that's going to make the zoom less intense, so there's less chance you're going to get target fixated. So if we look at this now, you can see the zoom is much better. I can basically see my plane's wings and the tail section when I'm zoomed in. So there's a lot less chance that I'm going to be target fixated in this, and again, we're not going to crash because we can see what's going on. The other thing is the angle isn't weird, so rather than zooming on the target, it's going to zoom directly in front of me in the center. So there's no weird angles to deal with, and it's going to be much easier to lead. So I'll just show you a quick example of this. We love the cannons here. So particularly with your snapshots, you're not aiming off screen anymore, so you can pretty much tell where you're firing rather than before where you're guessing, and that allows you to get the quick kills like that where they're doing sharp turns and whatnot, where you're coming in weird angles again. So not only is it going to be easier for aiming, but it's going to also help you learn how to lead your shots. So yeah, I recommend you set that up, guys, and get rid of the default aiming. Again, it's probably going to be user. Okay, so this final tip is a pretty basic one. Most of you should be familiar that to become good at any game, you simply need to practice and practice until you get good. And of course, it's no different with War Thunder. So what you can do is you can load up a few planes, create a custom battle with AI robots, and you can practice in here as much as you like without the worry of repair costs. So you'll find the custom battles by pressing start at the hangar screen, going to the battles tab, and it's under custom battles. You can then create a new session, find the dual map on the left hand side, so you'll have to scroll through all of them. Find Eastern Europe dual or Rice Terraces, for instance, and you can then configure that for arcade, realistic, and so on. You can set all your preferences, include the bots of course, make it private, and you can also configure the bot difficulty, so you've got the choice of ranks. Rank 1 is basically biplanes and rank 2 is the early monoplanes, so things like the P36s, the I-16s, you'll be dealing with them at rank 2. And moving down to 3 and 4 and 5, that's where you get more difficult planes. 5 is jets, so you probably don't want to deal with them. But yeah, definitely practice with rank 1 and rank 2 bots. They're going to help improve your aim, and then when you're confident enough, you can load up a real game and practice all over again with real human players. So yeah, just keep practicing, guys. That's really about it for the tips on how to aim with a controller. I mean, I've covered quite a lot there. Hopefully you've learned something from watching this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any of your own tips to share. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe